In this episode, I feel the true power of the Mythras community as people respond to my cry for help and provide me with some excellent information about animism. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 34, Aiding Inwils with Animism. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and welcome to March. Creating this podcast really makes me notice how quickly the months go by. It seems only yesterday that I was wishing you all a Merry Christmas, and now we are in March, heading towards spring, Easter, and soon summer. I'm sure I've told you all that I have made the hard decision to drop down to being part-time at work, which started at the beginning of this year, so that I could concentrate on recovering from various health issues I've been experiencing. This means that I am only at work for 3 days a week, and the rest is dedicated to creating content across a variety of platforms, including the Mythras content. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this. Well, I'm actually not sure how I managed to create all the content when I was full-time at work. I do really enjoy making it, and I am honoured to be part of the Mythras crew. Although I still feel that time is flying by. Where does all the time go to? Anyway, the time is flying by in this episode as well, and I don't have time to waffle because this is going to be a jam-packed episode. I have always known that we are part of a fantastic community. I have to say that the Mythras community is one of the most supportive and welcoming community I've ever been a member of. In episode 33, the last one, I made a cry for help. If you haven't listened to episode 33, then please do go back and check it out. As well as my cry for help, the rules guru, Matt Eager, makes an appearance when he helps us understand the evasion skill. Very, very helpful. My cry for help was to do with animists. As I created the Mythras rules videos on the various magic systems, the most requested video was for animists, and although I did create one, I blundered my way through the spirit world and never really had an understanding of what the spirits and the spirit world actually provided for both the players and the GM. So, in the last episode, I made my cry for help and got 2 excellent responses. First up, here is John. He is the writer of the new adventure for Monster Island called A Bird in the Hand. He's pre-recorded this for us, and he provides some great ideas for setting up the cults for your animists. Okay, over to you, John.
Hello, I'm John, author of A Bird in the Hand, an adventure for the Monster Island setting. So your players want an animist. The following is what I've learned when considering how to accommodate this branch of Mythras' magical traditions. Animism is a very flexible magical system, but for this reason it requires additional preparation, ideally before the adventure or campaign begins. There are 3 core principles. Firstly, animism is intrinsically linked to the cult and rank structure. so go and have a look at the Mythras core book in the Brotherhoods and Cults chapter. Your own cult need not be formalised in your game world, but you do need that measure of rank progression, as this gives greater access to powers under the trance and binding skill. Second, and this is critical, as the GM and with your players, you need a concept of what your spirit world is like, and from this, what spirits exist and how they are treated. Are spirits respected, feared or reviled? Are spirits natural and comforting, or are they part of the underworld, or otherwise unknowable to the living? Are spirits good or evil or neutral, or all of these? Does the spirit world possess a hierarchy, or are there many spirit worlds overlapping but never coinciding? Consider, what would your animists see if they used the trance skill to look into the spirit world? Thirdly, and also critically, spirits are not spells. They are personalities. Each spirit is an NPC. What relationship should the player character have with those spirits? Are they honoured ancestors, feared primal powers, alien beings to be exploited or enslaved? How is this relationship maintained? How do spirits change, evolve or react over time as the player character gets to know them? In developing your spirit cult and considering each of those 3 steps, this will help to shape the design of your spirit world and your animism. Develop yourself this working model of a spirit world, and this will help you present and play and use spirits significantly easier. When you have this spirit world model in mind, you can then make game world choices. Think about the corresponding mechanical choices that you also need to make. So, what spirit types should a cult offer? What spirits should be within the scope of the tradition or different traditions of animism in your setting? And what conditions, rites, or traditions and beliefs govern the summoning of spirits? What habits or customs must an animist follow? Animists are odd and strange and perhaps appear wild or barbaric or just odd and alien to those who might be sorcerers or follow a more civilized tradition. But these are all reasons why these rites and practices are all followed, because they must honour the spirits with which they have a personal relationship. So, how are spirits treated that are not within the spirit tradition of the animist? Can those spirits be controlled or coerced, or can they only be fought off? And then think about the spirits themselves. Do all spirits have to manifest in the real world? Or do they just stay in their own spirit world, maybe using the power of discorporation to draw the souls of mortals to them? Do spirits reflect the natural world? Are there nature spirits or elemental spirits and beast spirits? Or are spirits just the souls of the living, or the living creatures? Think about those. And then consider, why does a culture use animism? What do spirits offer that the other magics or gods do not? Does animism coexist with those other magics? Or is it a private and personal matter? Or is it a wide community belief? Finally, consider how the existence of animism and the other magical systems in your game world have affected each other. If spirits are hostile, lurking ready to possess the living at any chance, are anti-spirit spells common, taught to every priestly initiate, every sorcerer's apprentice? Are shamans welcomed and respected, perhaps as a way to hold off these evil spirits? Or are they driven away and reviled as consorting with the unknown? And how has animism been shaped by the existence of sorcery, mysticism, theism and folk magic? What spirits does a tradition need in response to other people's or other cultures' magic? All of this helps set the place of the player character's animist in the world, and it defines their magical and spiritual perspective. And it helps you, as the games master, develop your version of a spirit world and your understanding of animism, because the spirit world is a living place, full of the creatures that you've chosen to place there. For examples of animism and spirit worlds, look to Monster Island and Mythic Britain. Those two supplements offer very different views of how animism works and the relationship that people have with spirits. But even in those cases, keeping the three core principles in mind around the rank structure, around the core concept of what an animist would see if they use the trance skill to look into the spirit world, and remembering that spirits are personalities, that they are NPCs. Consider those three things, even using Monster Island or Mythic Britain, and you'll have a rich and detailed spiritual setting for your animist to play in. I hope you enjoy animism, and I hope these thoughts help you develop your version of animism in your Mythras.
Thank you so much for that, John. So many great suggestions and ideas there. If you want to hear more of John, then do check out episode 20 of the podcast, where he provides a review for his adventure on Monster Island, A Bird in the Hand. After receiving John's recording, I was so pleased that my cry for help had been answered. But wait, there is actually more. Rael from the Mythras Discord, links in the show notes if you're not already a member, and really you should be. Well, Rael contacted me and was willing to provide the answers to the questions that I posed in the last episode. I quickly took him up on his offer, and here is what we chatted about.
So hi folks, this is Rael. I am the admin on the Mythras Discord, and also have done the Opposed Roles podcast, and I spend a lot of time doing Mythras stuff. It's pretty much a main hobby for me.
Fantastic. And I was so excited when you replied to my cry of help about Animist, and that you would be able to cast some light on the subject. So
it's honestly one of my favorite magic systems that I've ever seen. So I was very excited for the opportunity.
And I hope it will become one of my favorite ones as well. So fingers crossed. So let's start off with, what's your experience of animists in campaigns or as a player?
Sure. So I first really started touching on animism in a small pirate campaign that we did, where we had somebody who wanted to do an animist, and so I tapped on Mark Shirley's voodoo cult that he had worked up to start really tinkering around with that. And then later we did a druid that was very similar to that sort of thing. It was a little bit more traditional role-playing game druid rather than like a Mythic Britain one, a little bit beefier. And then in my online game, my play-by-post, I had an animist character who summoned Jinn based on the stuff that came out of the Phoenix article, and then I had kind of a very animist light warrior who had some animist abilities, like he had a fetch who would be a trainer for some stuff. So there was
Brilliant.
that. And after all that came through, I started homebrewing a lot of stuff for Animism with my Shadowpunk campaign, and then extended it out into a real social contact system, which I thought.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you're definitely the right person to be talking to, definitely. So what's your sort of like, I often think that other magical systems like the theists and the sorcery, that's established in role-playing games, but the animist is something quite new and very exciting. So what's your sort of like overview about it? How do you see it?
Yeah, so animism is kind of a funny thing because it doesn't really have set spells in the same sense. A lot of people think about these individual spirits and they think they're going to summon them up and send them into combat for them or whatever, and that's perfectly reasonable within this model. But ultimately, I think of animism more of as a social contact system, where the entire social contacts that you've got are all spirits, and all of them may have individual ability to do stuff, whereas you might have social contacts who are, a sage that helps you do research or whatnot, or an arms dealer who can help you get guns. You have spirits who will be able to give you armor points, or they will be able to grant you skills, or they can teach you how to shape shift into a turtle or whatever, right? It's much more of a contact system than it is a summon stuff to go into combat.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. That seems to instantly start to make sense. And I know we didn't discuss this before, but do you think there's ever a clash between the animism and the theists, the gods, etc.?
So yeah, I imagine that that would be a cultural thing. Although in Fenlaw there isn't really, like there are cults that have both that are involved. It's really just kind of a view of how you view the world. Mythic Britain has two different spirit worlds, and they don't really even interact except on the physical plane, right? Like they when they manifest, the spirits might be antagonistic to each other. But the Britain Britain Animus and the Saxon ones are looking at different spirit worlds entirely. So you can have these things just very much overlap each other as much as you like. I can imagine that some theists may say, no, you have to worship our particular deity, and they try to crush out animism, which is common in our cultures. But it could also be the other way, where they try to crush out these beliefs of these monotheistic deities and keep them at the spirit level, so to speak.
Sounds brilliant. So if I was to want to start playing an animist or to bring one into my campaign, where's the best place to start? Do they get spirits when they start? What's all that about?
Sure. So the thing that I would start with, regardless of if you're doing a formal cult or not, is figure out what spirits are friendly to the animist. Right. And maybe more specifically, figure out what abilities you want those spirits to give them. Okay. So I think Monster Island really has some nice structure around this, where they've got 6 or 7 spirits that are that have particular abilities. So you'll have a nature spirit that will give them the ability to do echolocation or grappler, or give them armor points or whatnot. So that kind of contains the abilities that have, and that's probably the closest thing to spells that you've got. Okay. in there. So start with the spirits that are friendly. When in the how many abilities to give them section of Mythras, there'll be there's the D3 plus 3, D3 plus 6. Yeah, that's what I think of that as. That's what I shoot for. This is the number of friendly spirits that you've got, is whatever size that campaign is. Then I would think about which spirits are hostile to the cult.
Nice. Yeah.
And then I would leave the rest of them as neutral.
Yeah.
Just to give yourself some ease there, and I would assume that they would know most of the spirits that are friendly to the cult by the time that they are, certainly by the time that they're shaman, and probably before that, because a lot of it is governed off of the trance skill rather than off of the binding. So
yeah. And when you say different types of spirits, is that like the ancestor spirit and the nature spirit? Is that what you're talking about there, or something else?
So I would say that it's less about ancestor or nature in that larger sense, and more drive it down to something a little bit more specific. So think of the spirits as sort of a loose bag around some powers that are there. So if you think about it, I want to have a shaman who worships the turtle deity. Okay, fine, or the turtle spirit. You're going to pick a nature spirit because turtles are nature, right? And you're going to give him boost armor. You might have another nature spirit that they're familiar with that gives them the ability to hold their breath for a long time.
Nice.
Yeah. So you kind of start to mirror those abilities, and that's just an animist. That's an animal-based animism cult, right? Like that sort of thing. If you were to do something like Jinn, you're like, okay, I'm going to build out the structure for the Jinn and how those look. And so if you're looking at Ifrit or Marids, those might be hugely powerful, and no proper animist really deals with them, or they try to avoid them as much as possible. Whereas you might also define ghouls as undead spirits that are hostile to the cult. So it's putting some names around it and bounding those spirits a little bit in the context of the game. Otherwise, you're going to get things like, well, I'm friendly with nature spirits, and literally everywhere is nature, and then they have a lot of power, right?
Yeah. I really like that approach, in the sense that it's coming from the actual cult or the order, and how that is progressing or is being made up over the years. And I like it in the sense that when you were talking about the turtle spirit, that it's had armor or holding its breath. So that's a really nice way, I think, to approach it. Do you prefer that nature background, or more open like the Jinn?
So I don't know that I prefer one. I think the nature one is easier to do by a long shot. But that might really depend on your cultural context. I've been listening to a podcast called The Hidden Jinn, which is really educating me a lot on the Jinn. It's been a thing that I didn't even know the podcast existed until 2 weeks ago. So it's been educating me a lot on that. But if I looked at Shadowrun has elementals, and it has nature spirits, and those things are coming out of completely different traditions. But they already have some pre-built-in structure, right? Like there's fire, earth, air, water, versus all of the nature stuff. You can do quite a bit with that, but I think having some boundaries on it for your first go around is probably good. Like somebody else has built those boundaries for you, to give you an idea.
Yeah, and I think that's I've never ever, because I used to play Shadowrun 5th edition a lot, and really liked the shamans in there. Yeah. And then I'm suddenly now, I don't know why I haven't seen the connection, between the two systems, but I can see there being a connection there, between the nature spirits and the animal spirits in Shadowrun. So one of the things that I really get stuck with is, if I'm a sorcerer, I spend my experience points and I get some new spells, and I'm quite happy. But when I was reading it, I got this feeling that every time I wanted to grab a new spirit, I might end up being possessed or dying in spirit combat. How does that all work?
Yeah. So first off, I mean, when you're going into spirit combat, I think the attitude of the spirits towards you is really what's going to determine a lot of the result of that, right? So So if you want to negotiate some relationship with a friendly spirit, it is likely that the end result of that, if you fail, is that you're going to be ignored. It'll say, come back when you've gained experience or something like that, right? Honestly, if you go and take a look through the spirits, most of the spirits don't have the ability to do anything other than ignore you at the end of that. Is by far one of the most common things. So I ran through it early, and I was so curse and death spirit, haunts, sickness spirits, and wraiths are really the primary ones that have some ability to do something to you if you fail. Something more than, just ignore you or whatnot. Some of them possess you. Some of them can really do a lot of damage because they have the deadly ability or whatnot. Or they can give you sickness, or in the case of sickness spirits. But most of them don't really have a lot of ability. So think about like a nature spirit. What's he going to do if you fail? Nothing direct. He could, he's not going to possess you because that's not how they work. But that's another thing to think about, though, is when when you get to the point where you've done an animist or two and you're saying, okay, I want a new spirit because it's not covered by any of the ones in here. That's the thing to think about, is like, do you want them to have some ability to possess them after that?
Yeah.
Because
go on.
No, it's so if, think about like a nature spirit that had the ability to possess somebody. What does that mean?
Yeah.
That might look very much like the second episode of the second season of Witcher, where one of the Witchers gets possessed by the Leshy.
Yeah.
And he starts growing into a giant tree. And I'm like, well, that would be really a thing. That would be, start to be an abdication as defined in the Animist rules.
Yeah.
To that spirit's form.
And I really like how that's being built on when we're talking about the spirits now. It's sort of like progressing from that starting point when we were talking about who's the spirits that are friendly, antagonistic, etc., etc. And so it's a nice, it just progresses from there, as you do. Would there be evil animists?
So I don't see why there couldn't be. I mean, if you, I'll pull out Shadowrun as my classic example. Bug shamans and toxic shamans.
Exactly.
There's nothing to say that they can't exist. I mean, are they evil in the human sense? Sure. I mean, if they have some agenda that's counter to what we consider to be evil, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be the case. You could define a set of evil spirits that they want to be involved with, right? Like if you have, sickness shamans or death shamans, or could be like that. You could make a really cool necromancer out of that business. Just kind of define all of the death spirits and the wraiths and the haunts as friendly.
Yes,
to this animist cult, and then all the do the nature ones as against it, and suddenly you have a really crazy, awesome necromancer that comes out of that business. Different than the sorceress one, different than the theist one.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm gonna fetch out an undead spirit, and it's gonna possess this corpse over here, and suddenly he's just a lot more interesting than the other ones are, I think.
Do you know? I have to say that throughout this talk, things are clicking in my head into place, because I've always thought of like the haunts and the deaths and the sickness spirits as quite nasty and evil. But when you said there, and going back to the very first point you made about which spirits are friendly and which are not, and then suddenly when you said, those spirits are friendly to the person that is that necromancer, that all suddenly clicks into place now, and how you get that evilness, for want of a better word.
I know there'd be such a neat, really evil character to like, no, all of these guys are my friends, and they will do stuff for me. I'm not subverting them to my control. I've negotiated a contract with them. There is a much different sort of scenario, and that sickness spirit, he will go through and disease people, for an entire scene because I've asked him to do so, and we've arranged this thing, and I actually expend resources to do that. I expend experience points to maintain that connection.
Yeah. I was just thinking, because I don't judge me about this, but I really like the sometimes, I think it's because I'm often a GM, the nasty evil side of things. But I was just sort of like thinking, you know, trying to get into a location to gain something, you know, and this necromancer, for want of a better word, is saying, well, hang on a minute, I can have the sickness spirit go in and just, you know, plow a plague, you know, through there, you know, and then all of a sudden there's the moral, you know, that moral conflict that's going to happen with the party when they're sort of like thinking, oh, well, hang on a minute, is this the right thing to do, even though they can do it?
I know. And it's a very different sort of moral quandary, and you know, for the right group, that's an amazing game, right? Like it's like, oh, whoa, this is going to be something else, right?
It really is. And I really like that. It sounds strange when I say I like conflict in the game, but that's, I don't mean arguing and things like that. It's that moral conflict or that discussion.
That dilemma that comes out of that, right? Like we're going to make an active choice here because we have these tools.
Yeah.
To do that is like, and that defines your characters so much, right? Like, this says so much about your characters as you're doing that, and gives them an incredible amount of depth in just one little decision.
Have you? Am I right in thinking that shamans can club together to engage in the spirit world, or did I just imagine that?
No, that's in the core rule book to do. They can gather together to bind very large spirits. Monster Island has orchestral casting.
That's what
yeah, and so they're a little different coming up, but yeah, they can absolutely come together to bind really huge spirits. One of the guys on the Discord was talking about how each island has a spirit, in his particular campaign, and coming together to bind that giant spirit would be quite the feat, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that. So I'm sort of like, I've made up my animist. I really like this idea of the friendly, antagonistic, or neutral, and I'm sort of like, I've got some spirits under my belt, for want of a better word. But so what's the end product like with the Animist? What did they mature into?
So I mean, they end up, I think in my mind, they end up looking a lot like a crime boss, for lack of a better word, somebody who has an incredible amount of connections, who can get things done at the drop of a hat. They have negotiations, they have people that they can call pretty much to do whatever they like, right? Like if you are a shaman in a Monster Island type of setting, and a high shaman, and you see the colonists moving in on your area, you can enter into the spirit world, or very quickly or relatively quickly, and say, look, we have, I want to negotiate something with you guys here, or with the spirits of that section of nature, to say, can you slow them down, or can you make them get lost, or whatnot. You may already have that negotiation worked out. I would expect you would, and you just call upon that, and they show up in 1d6 minutes or whatever it turns out to be, to cause them a lot of issues. If you need to get yourself through an area, you may have a spirit of something that gives you stealth, that boosts your stealth ability, and so I mean, it kind of looks like a crime boss, and kind of also looks like a superhero if you look at it the other way around, like almost like Iron Man in a way, right? Like he's got always got a button he can push that does something for him, right? Or a Batman sort of thing. That's how I tend to look at it. It's not quite the same as like a theist or a sorcerer. It's more really about the connections that you got.
Yeah. And in the normal sort of, like, I was just trying to imagine a combat, the standard fighting a bunch of bandits, on the forest path. Do you see the Animist sort of like almost like buffing, and using the spirits to buff themselves or other people, or causing harm, or what how do you imagine that?
I don't know that I think about it any one particular way. I mean, first off, I would think that animist would likely have some fetishes with him because he needs to respond immediately, right? Like,
Yes.
so that would make some sense. And so he would have a set of fetishes that are going to help him in an immediate fashion, whether that's, one that gives him the camouflage ability and he can avoid the combat, or he's got one that gives them armor so he can pretty much laugh at whatever they're doing, or perhaps he has one that has an elemental in it and he pulls out that fire elemental and suddenly they're burning to the ground, right? Like it's a lot of tools that he could do. He's got a bat belt, right?
You mentioned Batman earlier, and I was just thinking it's almost like a utility belt. That they've got. Just for people who might be completely new to Animist, we've mentioned fetches there. Can you just briefly
fetishes is what I said there. If he fetch is different. So a fetish is an object or a location or a person, but in this case I was referring to an object that has a spirit bound to it. So you can very much think of this as a magic item, and you can activate it and the spirit comes forth and will do your bidding based on the fact that you control the fetish. No
need to go into the spirit world or anything like that. That's all been done and dusted.
Yes. It's not that is not like calling on a contact. This one is, you have direct control over a thing and he's going to go and do something for you. You can have fetishes that are on creatures, and you can have fetishes that are in locations. If you bound a nature spirit to a particular section of forest, then you could go into that and you literally summon up that spirit by just touching a tree or whatever, and he would be able to defend you immediately.
Nice.
Fetches are different. Fetches are a personal spirit. They can either be allied, very much similar to a familiar in Western lore, or they can be a mirror of the self. They in pre-Islamic lore, there's something called the Kareen, which is sort of a shadow self that is attached. It's a jinn, and it's kind of confusing whether it's separate or not. But I think mostly it's separate. And lots of cultures have this concept of a shadow self. Even Jungian psychology, if I remember correctly, has the shadow self. So either way, that's sort of a personal spirit that's always with you. Not every shamanistic culture has them, but a lot do. Not all of them use fetishes. All of them believe in doing up fetishes in that fashion, right? Like they don't want to bind the spirits, right?
Fantastic. You seriously, I have so much a better understanding of what's going on here, and I think what you've managed to do is contextualize it, and made it very real. You've mentioned a whole load of publications. If people want to get see examples of animism in working, actually working, which publications would you send them to? You mentioned Monster Island, I think, a few times.
Yeah, so Monster Island is the iconic example. If you pick up Mythras, your second book should be Monster Island: The End of Story. I will say that over and over again, mostly because I view Monster Island very much as the player's guide and the GM's guide for Mythras. There is a very, very extensive and beautifully detailed animism section of Monster Island with all the natives on there and all of their different spirit cults. There's something like 13 of them, and they're pretty well detailed out, along with a whole progression through all of the ranks of their cult. They even have a little nuance in there where all of the members of the tribe can trance, but they don't progress any further in trance until they join the cult proper and become a shaman, right? And they have gifts, they have fetches, they do fetishes of all the different varieties, and they have all of these powers. It is really, really a very well done up sort of thing. The other one I would point to would be, I think it's either Taskin Empire or Shores of Carantia, but I think it's Taskin Empire that has spirits and sorcery in at least one cult, and they have some nuances on that where they have a theistic cult that has a spell that allows them to do trance.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Before we sort of like drift away from the spirit world and go back to the real world, any recommendations or any things that you would like to say to the listeners if they're planning on starting their animists off?
Yeah, so as a GM or a player, when you're thinking about this, honestly, I love the notion of it being a contact system for it, and I would think about that. Think about, pull yourself together about 5 different powers that you might like for your animus, and kind of use that as the core to kind of define the scope of the thing. I think once you do that, it will flow a lot more easily. I absolutely think that, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the nature ones are pretty easy to do because we all kind of have an intuitive cultural feel for that. So I would start there and go from there, but it doesn't have to end there by any means. Those spirits are merely a set of examples in the book, and you can throw stuff together out of that will be really great for your particular campaign.
It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you today. And I've always thought animists have always appealed to me because I haven't had the opportunity to engage with them in any other system. And it seems really unique. And this is really, I need to get my teeth into Animist now and spirits.
No, yeah.
and really start working on it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love talking about this, and I really don't get to talk about it anywhere near enough. Certainly not, with somebody conversationally. It doesn't happen very often. And thank you so much. It's been a great amount of fun. Thank you.
Well, what more can I say? I was completely blown away by the support from the community, and huge thanks to both John and Rael for their support. I'm still working on my own idea for an animist. It will probably be ready for sharing in one of those episodes when I fly solo. Remember, if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then why not just drop me an email or message me and let me know what you would like to cover. I'm always looking for reviews or interviews or just chats with people. So if you are interested, then you can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the various forums I frequent. And that's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas of World Anvil. I really appreciate your support, and do also check out the Tapper Talk forums and the Discord, where there are some great people there sharing their ideas within discussions. So, until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in April. Until then, I hope all your opposed rolls succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.